Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'd like to introduce the topic. If all of you recall, that we had our strategic priorities process just over 18 months ago now, and one of the items in that document was the creation of this Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. If you remember back to that time at Foundry 45, there was a lot of discussion about all of these items. This one was actually one of the one that got a little bit more friction and discussion going. What are we doing? Why would we need to do this? How does this relate to TAD and the drug court and so on and so forth? So there was a little bit of back and forth, and if you remember, I was pretty insistent that we needed to have it in here, and I thought it was a positive thing. This goes back to the times of Judge Martins, actually. Judge Martins is the one who had originally suggested that we start a Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. That was actually, if our memory serves, under the auspice of creating the Treatment Alternative and Diversion Program, our TAD program. So it's probably close to 10 years old from where it first came from. Supervisor Chris Dice at the time, who I think was second vice chair, if I remember right, and chair of Health and Human Services, former clerk of courts here in the county, was a big advocate of trying to resurrect the idea. Anyway, we finally did ultimately put it into this document. I'm thankful for that. Thank you for that. And we then funded it in the biennial budget in the form of adding an additional attorney in the county attorney's office to give Brad Stern the time to be able to be the coordinator, so to speak. Brad is not the leader of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. That will be Judge Gernoth. She is the point person, will know much more and hopefully can speak much more to what a CJCC actually is than I certainly can. But Brad has the dedicated time in his schedule to do a lot of the administrative work as directed by that council. So I thank you again for putting this together. I know there's still probably some questions about what exactly is it that we're doing and trying to do. But ultimately, I think it's critical for all of the different aspects that work through the criminal justice system that are in different buildings and in our own silos are actually communicating. That has been a problem in the county as long as I've been here, dating back to TAD and even before. Someday I can tell you some stories from that first Criminal Justice Coordinating Council committee. They're quite funny and illustrate how poor the communication is in some cases. But in the end, I'm very hopeful, and I'm excited to have Judge Gernoth in particular leading point on this important endeavor. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and with that, Judge Gernoth.
Thank you for your introductory comments, and welcome, Judge Gernoth.
Thank you. Appreciate the introduction. Appreciate this opportunity to share with you what has now been the culmination of efforts to establish the Washington County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. This 10-member council will meet for the first time on January 14th of 2025. The council has been formed based upon the stakeholders that serve the criminal justice system and have significant contacts with that system. The members consist of a Washington County Circuit Court judge, myself, the county executive, your sheriff, the district attorney for Washington County, the managing attorney for the Washington County Public Defender's Office, the manager of the Washington County Office for the Wisconsin Department of Corrections, the chairperson of your Public Safety Standing Committee here for the board, the Chief Health and Human Services Officer for the Washington County Department of Health and Human Services, the Treatment Court Program Manager for the Washington County Department of Health and Human Services, and the President of the Washington County Law Enforcement Executives. These 10 members will work together in a collaborative format to address the issues facing our local criminal justice system and work collaboratively, hopefully in a proactive fashion, to address systematic improvements. Let's talk for a second about what a CJCC is and what it can offer to Washington County. A CJCC is a means by which elected officials and agency executives can meet to address issues that are facing a criminal justice system. It allows them to identify issues facing the system, to share data and information about their respective agencies and the system as a whole, and to develop comprehensive solutions to address challenges that are facing the system. Those challenges are meant, the solutions are meant ultimately to address and enhance public safety. CJCCs are intended to be permanent, ongoing advisory committees meant to address both specific issues but also to monitor the health of the system as a whole. CJCCs can enhance the understanding of the stakeholders, they can enhance the stakeholders' understanding of crime trends that are occurring in the community. They can work to evaluate the costs of the system and address inefficiencies that exist in the system, evaluate current resource allocation, and create conversations about whether better allocation of resources could occur. They can also serve to procure grant funds to target special initiatives that could better serve public safety for the community. In short, it seeks to overcome the limitations that exist in a traditional criminal justice system where, in large part, the stakeholders function as individual silos with limited communication, despite what is likely a desire to have improved communication, and non-systematic approaches, as everyone's working individually within the system, to bring these individuals together to work in a collaborative and comprehensive fashion. That's hopefully what we attempt to accomplish by establishing the CJCC. I've given you quite a bit of information. What questions can I answer with regards to the CJCC?
Are any questions from the committee or from our Zoom attendee?
Is this unique to Washington County? Or?
It is not at all. If you have an opportunity to do some research, CJCCs are common statewide. I would tell you more counties than not have CJCCs for the reasons that I've explained. It gives the opportunities to work collaboratively across those agencies that serve the criminal justice system and really works to maximize resources and create solutions. So no, it is fairly common, but I would add that every CJCC looks a bit different because each community and each government entity every county has a different structure. And so they look a little bit different. Membership looks a little bit different, but very common across the state.
I'm not an expert on it, but I don't see the downside in it. More communication, collaboration.
I appreciate your thought. I would agree with you. Yes.
Chairman Schleif?
How often do you anticipate this council will meet?
The plan is to meet on a quarterly basis, although additional meetings may occur based on action of perhaps a subcommittee that would be focusing on any of the particular areas that the committee wants to take action on.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you for your willingness to head up this committee. Your enthusiasm for it is obvious, and your concern for the benefiting Washington County and the way we handle criminal justice in Washington County is also obvious. So thank you very much, and I look forward to it.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Item 3B on the agenda is Federal Communications Commission rules on incarcerated people's communication. For that, we have Sheriff Schulteis. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. This is really just a discussion item just to make the committee aware of the new-ish FCC regulations that are moving forward, and particularly how it will affect the jail and really the budget moving forward. So the committee report that I drafted I was trying to be as unbiased as I could, trying to give the FCC's perspective on why they want to have caps. And what I'm referring to with these caps are communication systems within the jail. That we contract services for voice calling, for video conferencing, for texting, email services that are provided to the inmates. There have been several efforts in the past for the FCC to regulate the amount that can be charged towards the inmates. This particular one has gained a lot of traction. There are some objections that are being voiced by both the National Sheriff's Association as well as the Badger State Sheriff's Association, the State Association of Sheriffs that we have some concerns with. And what I wanted to do is bring up my captain of the jail, to have him kind of let you know the things that we are doing in Washington County that the FCC probably doesn't realize or is not acknowledging, that we try to mitigate some of their concerns. Well, if Captain Lehman, if I could have you come forward.
Thank you. Good morning, Captain Lehman. Welcome.
Hello, good morning. So I'll kind of just continue with what the sheriff was introducing, discussing the Federal Communication Commission ruling on capping inmate phone rates. Before I dive into the actual FCC, what they're trying to implement, I'd like to talk a little bit about our current system and how we operate here at the Washington County Jail. So currently we partner with a company called ICS, or Inmate Calling Solutions. They provide the phone end of inmate communication. So inmates are able to use the phone system to call family and friends. That is all handled through a contract with Inmate Calling Solutions. There's other parts of our inmate communication system, video visitation, text messaging. Basically, it's like emails back and forth. That is all handled through our SIDNet system, which is a part of our, actually it's a part of our commissary contract with Stellar. So there's a couple different vendors that we are dealing with when we talk about overall inmate communications. I'll focus more on the phone end of things because that's where it's going to affect us the most. Our SIDNet, the messaging, we don't gain a lot of revenue out of that end of the system. So I'll be focusing more on the phone portion. Basically, ICS partners with us. They bring in all of the hardware, all of the software. They provide all of the technical support. They provide investigative tools, which we use, our Detective Bureau uses, our Corrections Division uses in reviewing all those phone calls. They bring all of that stuff in for free. They don't charge us anything for that. So the reason for that is we share that revenue that comes in. So our current agreement, the Washington County Sheriff's Office receives 70.1% of the commissions, and the ICS would receive the other part of that, the 29.1. So that is their, ICS also charges some upfront service fees and things like that on credit and debit transactions, things like that. So they have other reasons to be in this business as well. They know that once they partner with a county jail, they'll earn those revenues. So that's how they cover all of their costs on the hardware and software side of things. And so our current rate that we are charging matches what the FCC's cap is right now. So it's 21, for our size jail, it's 21 cents a minute. So that is what we are currently charging. And just to kind of give you an idea, the FCC does talk a lot about the hardships that the families experience in their loved ones being in contact with them and the costs. We do an incredible amount of phone calls that go through the jail. I just pulled the numbers for September. In September, we had 11,456 phone calls that were completed by our inmates. That averages out to 55 phone calls a month per inmate. This also, if you break that down by minutes, that constitutes for about 94,976 minutes of charged phone time, which is about 7.6 hours per inmate a month on the phone, which is a lot, but of course that is one of their main sources of communication with family and friends. So our phone system is being used quite extensively. Besides all of those numbers, the 11,000 phone calls, that does not include each week. Every single inmate is allowed a 15-minute free phone call. So that's built into the system. It resets every week, and so that each inmate will receive that phone call. And then when a subject comes into custody, each phone call that they call for the first time, they get a free 60-second phone call. So that's more like just letting your loved ones know that you're incarcerated. So that those numbers that I I talked about the 11,000 phone calls. That doesn't include any of those phone calls either. That is just the calls that actually cost money. So a little historical context on the FCC and their oversight and regulation of inmate phone calls. This has been going on for years. Really, it goes all the way back to year 2000 when it really became, even before that, in the late 90s, when it started becoming an issue or a much debated issue, I guess. But I'll just take you back to since 2013. Between 2013 and 2018, the FCC that's when they really started putting caps on those rates on inmate phone calls. There's been 2 different rulings, or 3 different rulings during that time where they capped and changed caps. One of them was overturned eventually. They basically found that the FCC did not have certain authority over interstate or intrastate calls within the state. So some of those previous rates were rolled back, but some of them did stick. And then that takes us up to kind of the year 2022 was when President Biden signed the Martha Wright Reed Just and Reasonable Communications Act. So what that act basically did is it gave the FCC a much broader authority over regulating inmate calls. It kind of erased all of those reasons that overturned some of their decisions in the past. It also extended their authority to not only phone calls, but it also went to video visitation and that kind of communication, which before none of that was really under the scope of the FCC. So it really broadened their authority to all inmate communications and kind of took away any kind of limitation. So that kind of started this current movement. In July of 2024, the FCC released the implementation order for some of their caps. It was released in July of 2024. The initiative has gained some momentum, mostly due to some bipartisan support and advocacy from justice reform organizations. So this time it seems like it has a lot of traction. There is some opposition. I'll talk about that a little bit as well. But that kind of brings us to what kind of impact is this going to have on Washington County, and specifically the jail budget. So the revenues that we receive through inmate phone calls, they go to directly offset operational costs. So our revenues that we take in, they offset any kind of expenses that we incur for operations. So if we lose revenue, we've got to, the costs go up basically. So what this is effectively doing is it's asking the taxpayers to make up that difference, since really our only option is to increase the jail budget by however much we're losing out on revenue, phone revenue. So there are a couple of other things on our radar that could be possible issues down the road. This act could really drive the phone companies that are in the market right now out of business. If it's no longer profitable for them, they've got no reason to continue on with the way that they're, at least with the business plans that they operate under. So I can definitely see companies changing from providing us with the software and the hardware to now this becoming a service that we are paying for, much like medical service, food service. So not only are we going to, definitely be feeling the loss of the revenue, but in the future we could be paying for this service. Another concern that's in the back of our heads right now is the simple fact that criminal behavior doesn't stop when somebody is incarcerated. They continue on, and our phone system has been a tremendous tool on investigating new crimes and gaining evidence on crimes that they're in jail for as well. So our phone system is a tool that is very valuable for protecting the safety of the community. If these changes continue to decrease those revenues for both us and the phone companies, we can expect those tools to either lessen or become another source that we're going to have to pay for if we want to continue to utilize it in that manner. So actual numbers, it's kind of hard to project, mostly because what we've seen over the years is most of our inmate population, they've got a pool of money that's available to them, whether that's through themselves or family or friends. That pool of money gets spent. There is a lot of money that goes through the jail, whether they're purchasing commissary items or they're utilizing the phone. Just because they're saving on phone, there's a very real potential that our commissary sales are going to go up, so our revenues on that end of things will increase. But that's all purely speculation at this point. But in just running the numbers, in how they're basically taking that 21-cent cap and they're going to be dropping it down to 9 cents a minute. So that pretty much eliminates any kind of revenue for all parties involved. So we would be looking at approximately $100,000 a year, conservatively. Could be more than that. Could go up to $150,000 a year of revenue that we would no longer be seeing. As far as compliance and deadlines, the language in the act or in the implementation order gives a lot of exceptions and different dates. So I have to reach out to the county attorney's office to kind of get their opinion on when this is going to be implemented for us here at Washington County, because there is some language in there regarding contracts. So we're in a contract right now. We have annual renewals on that contract. So the earliest that this could be affecting us would be April of 2025, but definitely by April of 2026, everyone will have to comply to this. A couple other areas that we are kind of monitoring. Let's see here, more with the phone calls being much cheaper, there's going to be a lot more volume of phone calls. So that could potentially cause an issue with staff time. We may have to dedicate more staff time in reviewing phone calls, again, going back to that safety and security portion of it, or invest in more technology to do some of that reviewing of phone calls, automated and better technology to pull that stuff out automatically. And then again, with government imposed price caps, this could distort the market, discourage private companies from getting into the business of inmate phone, and which could ultimately, greatly affect any future RFPs when we're going out to bid on these kinds of services. So all very very realistic issues, and I'm sure we're going to be kind of moving back. I said this really wasn't going to affect us until April at the earliest. We are feeling it already. I just don't have any numbers on that quite yet. Our revenues for phone are always 45 days. We get them 45 days after the close of the month. So in November, some of the restrictions on the phone companies for what they can charge in service fees, that has already gone into effect in November. Which our phone company, ICS, is already passing some of that on to us. So the first 35 cents out of every phone call is now deemed non-commissionable, so it doesn't go towards our commissions. That in itself in my estimates, is going to cost us probably about $4,000 to $5,000 a month, starting, it'll really be starting in December here. So I'll know that for sure in, 45, probably about mid-February is when we'll start seeing that. As the sheriff alluded to, the National Sheriff's Association has filed a petition for review in Court of Appeals. They're estimating that we're not really going to get an answer on that until sometime after May of 2025. Inmate phone companies have also filed some actions against the order, but again, we're not going to know the outcomes of those for quite some time. I'm sure it'll be implemented before we hear those. That's kind of how it played out the last time when it did get rolled back. So I'll open it up to questions. If you had any questions about our current system, or if you have questions about the FCC order.
Are there any questions from the committee?
I have a question.
Please.
I'm just curious, who collects the fee? Is that,
So ICS is the company that takes care of all of that. So they do the accounting. On a monthly basis, I get a report which shows all of the phone calls broken down by type, if it's interstate or intrastate or international calls. Gives me a report of all those calls with the number of calls, the minutes, and then the total revenues earned.
so they manage all the collections and then just distribute the revenue back to the county?
Correct. It's actually broken into two different sections. There's part of the revenue gets paid to us directly from ICS. Another portion of it is our phone system is tied into our financial inmate account system. So there is a large portion of that money that is automatically pulls into our account here at the county, and then we send it over to the treasurer's office for disbursement into the accounts.
Is there a limit on phone usage?
So the only limit is per phone call. The longest phone call you can make is 15 minutes, but you can make repeated phone calls.
One detail you said was they get one 60-minute call to call their loved ones that they're in jail?
That's actually
that-
60 seconds, sorry.
Oh, 60 seconds,
60
I'm
seconds,
sorry.
yeah.
Yes. It would be an interesting call, I think, in 60 seconds.
Yeah, they're often very, very, very short and sweet.
All right, thank you.
Any other committee meetings? Supervisor Toma.
I'm assuming that all of these calls are recorded,
Yes.
so who takes that, who stocks that, or who keeps that information?
Archive that?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so that is saved through ICS. We've got the ability to review that whenever we want. Our detective bureau has access to it, so it is an investigative tool for sure. We do have the ability to go into the system and set up, if we have a verified attorney's phone number or something like that cannot be recorded, we can set them up to not record, but for the most part, all of the phone calls are recorded.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Do have a couple questions on, and this is I don't expect you to answer, but just throwing it out there. Is the data that we receive from the recorded phone calls worth paying for? And that's obviously a larger sheriff's department question to answer, but it's something to think about. And then the other thing is, it seems like years ago when we had pay phones, this wouldn't have been an issue. I mean, as long as you got a quarter to keep popping in the slot, you're good to go. And the only reason this became an issue for FCC or anybody is that now we have better tracking through technology. For the good of the sheriff's department and people of Washington County, yes, there are balances on both sides, but I think we were almost in a better situation when it was a cash transaction with less recording, or less, tracking on the finances of it.
Yeah, technology does complicate things. But it is a tool that is heavily relied on, much more than you would think, because inmates are whenever you utilize the system, you're told that your call may be recorded. We've all heard that. And it doesn't stop them from discussing things that are very, very important from investigative side of things. So,
Thank you for the information. Does anyone have any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate the input. Item 3C on the agenda, use of strategic priorities funds for CGIS compliance in the sheriff's office. And could we get some, Captain Stoicer, so you give us a little bit of background information before we have a motion? Just so we.
So good morning. Seems like every time I come up here, I'm asking for money. So CGIS is the Criminal Justice Information System. It's the requirements are put out by the FBI. We've always had them. They work in unison with the State Crime Information Bureau. And it's how we get information on people, such as wanted information and whether or not subjects are wanted from another state and things like that, arrest information. It all flows through that CGIS system. So the previous CGIS policy that we were working under was about EAFIC, and in July of '24, the revised policy was about the EAFIC, so it probably more than doubled as far as the requirements on users of that system. These requirements the new requirements some are fairly simple in ways that we background people or take new applicant information. For example, they no longer, you can no longer do photocopies of driver's license and things like that. It needs to be an actual photograph. It details the pixels that the photograph's got to be. You're trying to make sure that the person that you're hiring is indeed the person that whom they say they are. So that those are things that we're putting into place. They're relatively little cost. It's just a matter of changing the way we currently do things. But there's other sections in here that are software related, specifically to this two-factor identification. Two-factor identification is basically saying that to be able to access this CGIS information, you have to have two methods of being able to do it. So you have your password, and then you've got another method, and it can be done in a variety of different ways. So this policy was released in July. Enforcement starts October 1st, and this is one of the items. Two-factor authentication is one of the items that they deem is immediately sanctionable. So we had an audit this fall on a lot of things. They allow you to kind of work towards implementing them. This is one of the immediately sanctionable areas that they're saying that it has to happen. And then we are also faced with a federal in-person audit. It's not a guarantee that they're going to come to Washington County, but they are going to be in southeast Wisconsin sometime in '25. And I think we can't say we're working towards something and then have these folks come show up and then not have anything done. So that's the position I'm in today. Our Director of Information Services, Joe Wappert's here. He can explain the nuts and bolts if you need to have his explanation on how this two-factor identification works. But basically, it's a third-party software that you can be done in a number of different ways. It can be put on a phone. It can be done by a token or dongle. But the way it works is it happens at the Windows login level. So once you're logged in, any 30 minutes of inactivity, the Windows will close down, and it requires this dual-factor authentication to get back into the Windows. That's so that if you've got your computer open or something, some person can't come and see what kind of CGIS information is on there.
Very good, thank you. Do we have a recommendation from the committee? The committee report is requesting use of strategic priority funds in the amount of $12,350.08. Do we have a motion to recommend approval? Supervisor Toma?
I'll second that.
Supervisor Krieger-Gundrum, thank you. Any further discussion or questions for Captain Stoicer? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Final item on our agenda for this morning is item D, 3D, an update on the 2024-2025 strategic priorities.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, distinguished members of the Public Safety Committee. You have the one strategic priority from my office, which going into 2025, we will definitely have more comprehensive strategic priorities available. But as far as this one goes, you have seen that the establishment of the Fire EMS Needs and Assessment Task Force has been established by the county executive. The chief of staff has hired me and has completed that task. Well done. Yes, thank you. As you can see, we also have the recommendations, and it's projected for March of 25. That EMS Needs and Assessment Study has been ongoing, as I reported last month. And the fire and EMS grants, we obviously had one for 2024 upon the county executive and your approval. That will be ongoing for 2025. And then we will review that going forward as it's indicated in the strategic priorities going forward beyond 25 for the next biennium for 26 and 27. So that is indicative and predicated on what that fire and EMS needs assessment reveals to us in March. So stay tuned.
Very good. Are there any questions of our Chief of Public Safety?
Thank you.
Thank you. We're getting ready to adjourn, and I'd like to wish all of you who celebrate holidays to have a happy holidays, and those of you who celebrate Christmas to have a very Merry Christmas. We are adjourned. Thank you.